They told me I wasn't welcome, that my kind didn't belong on their private island. I smiled, walked away, and said nothing. But what they didn't know was that I'd already signed the papers. By sunrise, the island they banned me from belonged entirely to me. When the envelope first arrived, I thought it was a mistake. Cream colored, sealed with gold wax, and stamped with the crest of the Hollington estate. My husband's old money circle that looked at me like I'd stumbled into their world by accident. I turned it over in my hands, half curious, half suspicious. Inside, the letter was brief and polished. You are cordially invited to the annual Hollington Island retreat. My name sat alone on the page, elegant but cold, as if whoever wrote it didn't really mean it. I showed it to my husband that evening over dinner. He smiled too quickly, the kind of smile people wear when they're hiding something behind their teeth. See, he said, they're finally coming around. His voice was too light, too rehearsed. I wanted to believe him. I really did. I wanted to think maybe, after all these years, they'd stop seeing me as the outsider, the woman who didn't come from their country clubs, who didn't speak with the same clipped confidence that comes from generations of wealth. But deep down, a quiet voice inside me whispered, don't be naive. Still, I went along with it. I told myself this could be a fresh start, maybe a chance to show them that I belong not because of who I married, but because of who I was. I picked out a simple white linen dress and tied my hair back. I didn't want to outshine anyone. I just wanted to feel accepted for once. The private jet was already waiting at the airstrip when we arrived. The guests, his friends, looked at me with that same polished politeness I'd seen 100 times before. Smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Compliments that felt like barbs hidden in lace. One of the women, all diamonds in perfect posture, leaned over and said, how lovely that you could join us this year. I didn't realize they were expanding the guest list. She said it sweetly, but her tone cut sharper than glass. I laughed it off. That's what I'd learned to do. Make people comfortable, even when they were making me uncomfortable. Pretend it didn't hurt. Pretend I didn't notice. My husband squeezed my hand as if that made up for the silence he kept when they mocked me right in front of him. As the jet soared above the clouds, I looked out the window and watched the ocean stretch endlessly below. The island shimmered in the distance, framed by sunlight like something out of a dream. Beautiful, untouched, exclusive, a paradise for those who thought they owned the world. But as we descended toward the landing strip, something in the pit of my stomach twisted. It was that same quiet warning, the one that had followed me my entire life whenever I was about to walk into another mistake. I didn't know what awaited me on that island, but I could already feel it. The chill beneath the warmth, the hostility beneath the welcome. I just didn't know yet that this invitation wasn't a bridge. It was a test. And by the time it was over, I'd make sure they regretted ever sending it. The moment we stepped off the plane, I felt it. The kind of silence that hums with judgment. The island was breathtaking, yes. All turquoise water and soft wind. The scent of salt and hibiscus heavy in the air. But beneath the beauty, something else lingered. A tension you could almost taste. The kind that told you you were being watched, measured, and quietly dismissed. A line of staff stood waiting at the dock, their uniforms crisp, their smiles practiced. The hostess, tall, blonde, and polished like she'd stepped straight out of a yacht magazine, approached with a clipboard in her manicured hand. Her voice was sugar-coated, but her eyes flicked over me as if I'd wandered into the wrong photo frame. Good afternoon, she said, scanning the list. May I have your name, please? I gave it calmly. She smiled again, tighter this time. I'm so sorry, she said after a moment, tilting her head just slightly. I don't see you listed among our registered guests. I blinked, thinking I'd misheard. There must be a mistake, I said, glancing at my husband. He looked just as confused, or at least pretended to. We were both invited, I added, my voice steady but my pulse quickening. The hostess turned to him. Yes, Mr. Hollington, your name is here. But as for... She trailed off, looking back at me. I'm afraid she's not. Afraid. Her tone carried the kind of pity that wasn't pity at all. Around us, I could hear the murmurs starting. The other guests, their perfectly trained voices dipping into whispers. One of them, a man in a linen suit, chuckled softly. Must have been an oversight, he said, but the smirk curling at the edge of his mouth told a different story. I waited for my husband to say something, anything, but he hesitated, his mouth opening and closing like he couldn't quite find the right words. Maybe we should just, he began, but I stopped him with a look. I'd been here before, not on this island, but in this moment, the moment when silence becomes betrayal. The hostess straightened her clipboard. I'm terribly sorry, she said again, but our policy is quite strict. Only approved names are permitted to stay on the island. I can arrange for a boat to take you back to the mainland if you'd like. My chest tightened, but I smiled. A real smile this time, not the kind they expected. That won't be necessary, I said quietly. I'll find my own way. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Even the waves seemed to hush. I could feel every eye on me, every ounce of their superiority pressing down like humidity. I walked back toward the dock without another word, heels clicking against the polished wood, each step steadier than the last. Behind me, I heard someone mutter, "Some people just don't know their place." They were right in a way, I didn't, because my place was never beneath anyone. As the boat pulled away, I turned once more to look at that glittering island, a paradise built on arrogance. The laughter of the guests carried faintly across the water, smug and hollow. I closed my eyes and let the sound fade behind me. They thought they'd banned me, but what they really did was set me free to build something greater. And soon, that same island would learn exactly who they'd tried to keep out. Back on the mainland, the laughter from that island still echoed in my head. It wasn't just the sound, it was the feeling behind it. That smug certainty that people like me would always be the outsider, the guest who never quite belonged. I remember sitting by my window that night, still wearing the white dress I'd picked so carefully, watching the ocean lights flicker in the distance. I should have cried, but I didn't. Instead, a strange calm settled over me. Quiet, heavy, deliberate. The kind that comes not from peace, but from decision. Humiliation had a way of sharpening my focus. I'd learned that long before I ever married into wealth. My mother used to say, when people push you out of a room, build a bigger one. She'd raised me on strength disguised as grace, and I'd spent my whole life doing exactly that. I'd built businesses when no one believed I could. I'd faced rejection, bias, and endless patronizing smiles, but every single time I turned it into fuel. So this island humiliation wasn't the end, it was the ignition. Over the next few weeks, I disappeared from their social radar. No charity brunches, no country club dinners, no photo ops with people who only smiled for the camera. I buried myself in my office downtown, the one space that still felt like mine. The glass walls looked over the city, glowing with ambition and possibility. My assistant, Denise, noticed the change immediately. "You're quiet," she said one morning, sliding a folder across my desk. "That usually means something big's about to happen." I smiled faintly. Maybe it already has. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened an old binder, a relic from the early days of my company. Inside were clippings, notes, plans, contracts, reminders of everything I'd built from nothing. I ran my fingers across the pages, remembering the nights I'd worked past midnight in a rented office, eating instant noodles and writing business proposals no one would read. Those struggles hadn't just built a company, they'd built me. It was strange how success could make you forget your own strength until someone tried to take your dignity away. The more I thought about that island, the hostess's fake smile, the clipboard, my husband's silence, the more I realized something. They had power because I'd allowed them to define what belonging meant. But belonging, I realized, isn't granted. It's claimed. One evening, I got a call from an old friend, Martin, a real estate lawyer I'd helped years ago when his firm was struggling. "I heard what happened," he said carefully. "You know, that island isn't actually owned by your husband's family. It's held through a private trust that's in trouble. Word is, they're quietly looking for buyers." I froze. "Buyers?" "Discreet ones," he said. "They don't want the public to know. Could be a smart investment if you're interested." His voice trailed off, but my mind was already racing. I didn't tell him the reason for my sudden interest. I just said, "Send me the documents." When I hung up, I stood at the window again, the same ocean stretching endlessly before me. The same waves that carried me away from that island were now whispering a promise back. Come claim what's yours. That night, I drafted my first proposal, not in my name, but under a shell company I'd quietly built years ago for private acquisitions. It was the same structure I'd once used to buy struggling businesses before turning them around. Except this time, I wasn't saving anyone's company. I was reclaiming my dignity. In the weeks that followed, I worked in silence. I said nothing to my husband, nothing to the people who had laughed behind my back. Let them believe I'd moved on. Let them think they'd broken me. Because when people think you're weak, they never see the storm coming. Every signature, every transaction, every late night call became part of something bigger, a quiet revolution written in ink. And as I watched the pieces fall into place, that same calm returned. Not the calm of defeat, but of preparation. They had taken my place on that island. But soon, the ground beneath their feet would belong entirely to me. The day the first document was signed, I felt something shift inside me. Not joy, not vengeance. Something quieter. Power. The kind that doesn't need to shout. It moves in silence, behind closed doors, beneath the noise of those too proud to notice they're standing on shaky ground. Martin and I began working discreetly. We met only at night in a small cafe near the harbor, nothing glamorous, nothing that drew attention. The trust that owns the island is drowning in debt, he said one evening, spreading papers across the table. They've been trying to cover it up, but they need liquidity fast. They're dividing ownership among smaller shell investors to raise cash. He paused, lowering his voice. If we move quickly, you can acquire controlling interest without anyone realizing who you are. I nodded slowly, scanning the papers, feeling the words sink in. Every line, every clause felt like a key fitting perfectly into a lock that had been waiting for me all along. I signed my initials at the bottom of the first file, and that's when it began, the quiet takeover. I created multiple holding companies through a network of trusted people, old employees, mentors, even a few women I'd helped fund their startups years ago. Each one held a small, harmless-looking share, nothing suspicious. On paper, I didn't exist, but in reality, I was the pulse behind it all. At night, when the city went dark, I'd sit by my desk with nothing but my laptop light and a glass of whiskey. Every click was deliberate, every transfer a whisper of control, slipping from those who mocked me into my hands. I didn't feel guilt, not for a second, because what they'd done to me on that dock wasn't just personal. It was a declaration of how people like me were meant to stay outside, looking in. I wasn't breaking their rules. I was rewriting them. My husband noticed the change, of course. One night, he stood by the doorway watching me type. "You've been distant lately," he said. "Is everything okay?" I didn't look up. "Perfect," I said simply. He lingered for a while before walking away, still clueless. I wondered if he even remembered the look on my face that day on the island, the humiliation he'd allowed to happen. Probably not. People like him only remember what bruises their ego, not what wounds your soul. Weeks turned into months. The world went on as usual, and the island continued its charade of exclusivity, lavish parties, champagne mornings, and laughter that didn't last. Meanwhile, the foundation beneath it quietly shifted. My companies kept buying, piece by piece, until the final document slid across my desk one evening. Martin called as soon as it was done. "Congratulations," he said softly. "You now own 72% of Hollington Island." I leaned back, closing my eyes, letting the weight of it settle. The same place that had denied me entry now had my name carved into its deeds. For the first time, I exhaled deeply. The calm returned, not born from anger, but from triumph earned without cruelty. I didn't need to announce it. I didn't need applause, because the sweetest victories are the ones won in silence. And mine had just begun. The invitation arrived almost a year later, gilded and self-satisfied, just like before. "Annual Hollington Island Retreat," it read. Same island, same people, same illusion of grandeur. This time, I laughed when I opened it. It felt poetic, almost like the universe was handing me a stage I hadn't even asked for. Only this time, the script had changed, and I was the author. They didn't know, of course. The purchase had been quiet, sealed under legal layers and aliases no one would ever connect to me. To them, I was still the woman who'd been turned away at the dock, the outsider who'd learned her lesson. Let them think that. Let them prepare their smug smiles and champagne flutes. It made what was coming even sweeter. When the day came, I arrived alone. No husband, no entourage, just me, in a flowing ivory dress that moved like the tide. The moment my heels touched the dock, I could feel the shift in the air. The same hostess from before, the one who'd smiled with pity, froze mid-step. Her eyes widened as if she'd seen a ghost. "Oh, Mrs.?" she stammered, searching for words. "I wasn't aware you'd be attending." I smiled gently. "That's because I wasn't invited," I said, handing her a folded document. "But I'm not here as a guest this time." She opened it, her fingers trembling as she read the letterhead. New ownership confirmation. My name, clear, undeniable, signed at the bottom. The color drained from her face. Around us, conversations faltered. People turned, curious, sensing a disruption in their perfect order. One of the men, the same one who'd mocked me a year ago, stepped forward. "This must be some kind of joke," he said, forcing a laugh. "You can't possibly—" I cut him off with a look. "You'd be surprised what a woman can do when she's told she doesn't belong." The hostess tried to recover, her voice shaky. "So, you own the island now?" I nodded, calm as the sea around us. "Yes, every beach, every villa, every inch of the soil you once thought was too good for me." Silence rippled through the crowd, sharp as wind through glass. My husband appeared then, late, of course. Confusion etched across his face. He hadn't known either. "You did this?" he asked softly, almost afraid of the answer. "I did," I replied, my tone even. "And you helped me without realizing it. Every moment you stayed silent while they humiliated me. That was motivation." The party stumbled on awkwardly after that. Glasses clinked, but no one truly celebrated. The air was heavy, with the realization that the balance had shifted, permanently. As dusk fell, I stood at the edge of the terrace, overlooking the ocean that had once carried me away in shame. The waves were the same, but I wasn't. I'd come back not for revenge, but for reclamation, to prove that grace and power could exist in the same breath. Behind me, the music faltered, and I heard someone whisper, "She really owns it." Yes, I did. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was trespassing in their world. I had built my own. They tried to recover, of course. People like them always do. The next morning, the island's so-called elite gathered for brunch, pretending everything was fine. I could feel their eyes on me as I walked in. Not with curiosity this time, but with fear disguised as politeness. Their hierarchy had cracked, and no one knew how to behave when the person they used to look down on was suddenly above them. The same man who once joked that I was lucky to be invited stood up, forcing a smile. "So, what happens now?" he asked lightly, as if this were all just an amusing twist of fate. I looked at him for a long moment before answering. "Now," I said softly, "the island changes." I announced it then, not with anger, not with gloating, but with clarity. The island that once prided itself on exclusivity would now open its doors to everyone. No background checks, no whispered discrimination hidden behind membership policies. I explained that we'd build new spaces, art programs, mentorship retreats, scholarships for underrepresented entrepreneurs and young creators. At first, there was stunned silence. Then the protests began. One woman, her pearls trembling against her throat, said, "But this place it's tradition." I smiled. "Exactly. And traditions that thrive on exclusion aren't legacies. They're cages." My husband tried to intervene. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. "These people won't understand." I met his gaze, unflinching. "They don't have to. Understanding isn't required for change." The weight of that truth hung between us. For the first time, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not love, not pride, maybe respect, or maybe realization that he'd lost me long before this day. By afternoon, the news had spread. Word traveled fast among the elite, and soon headlines read, "Former billionaire's wife takes control of Hollington Island." They called it revenge, but it wasn't. It was justice. Quiet, strategic, and irrevocable. As the sun began to set, the old guard started packing their designer luggage, faces pale and silent. The island they'd ruled for generations was no longer theirs. They left with bitterness in their hearts, but I stayed, barefoot on the sand, feeling the tide wash over my feet. I hadn't destroyed their world. I'd simply reminded them it was never theirs to begin with. When the last yacht disappeared beyond the horizon, the island fell silent. No laughter, no clinking glasses, no empty compliments, just the sound of waves brushing against the shore. Steady, honest, free. I stood where I had once been turned away, the dock glimmering beneath the setting sun, and breathed in the peace I'd built with my own hands. For the first time, I felt no anger, no need to prove anything. The victory wasn't in owning the island. It was in knowing I didn't need their acceptance anymore. What they once used to humiliate me had become a symbol of resilience, not revenge, but rebirth. My husband came to me quietly, the guilt heavy in his voice. "You didn't have to go this far," he said. I smiled faintly. "No," I replied, "but you should have stopped them before they went that far." He had no words after that, and I didn't need any. Some lessons are best learned in silence. As twilight deepened, I walked barefoot along the beach, the same waves that once carried me away now welcoming me home. The stars blinked awake above, and I realized something. Power isn't loud. It's calm. It's knowing you can walk away and still win. I turned toward the villa, my villa, lights glowing softly in the dusk, and whispered to myself, "They banned me from this island." But I didn't just return. I rewrote its story. And that, finally, was peace.